Dear friends, we're working hard to share these with you. Please subscribe and like our work. Thank you in advance. If you're ready, let's begin our story. Captain Tom Bradley had exactly 48 hours of shore leave on Crossroads Hub, and he'd planned to spend them the same way he'd spent every shore leave for the past 15 years, restocking his cargo hauler supplies, filing his shipping reports, and finding a quiet bar where he could drink beer and avoid conversation with anyone who might complicate his simple, profitable, carefully organized life. The small hand that suddenly grabbed his sleeve in the station's crowded marketplace definitely qualified as a complication. Tom looked down to find himself face to face with a little alien girl whose tear-stained cheeks and desperate expression made his chest tighten in ways he'd forgotten were possible. She couldn't have been more than 7 in human terms, with the kind of pointed ears that marked her as Eridani and eyes that held far too much worry for someone so young. "Please, human," she said in carefully pronounced standard, her accent thick with the musical harmonics of her native language. "Please, you help us." Tom glanced around the marketplace, noting that other shoppers were giving them a wide berth. Crossroads Hub served as a trading post for dozens of species, but conversations between humans and undocumented alien children tended to attract the wrong kind of official attention. "Kid," he said gently, trying to extract his arm from her surprisingly strong grip, "I think you've got the wrong person. I'm just a cargo hauler." "No," she insisted, her small fingers tightening on his sleeve. "You have kind face. Kind eyes. My mama always say to trust the ones with kind eyes." Tom felt his carefully maintained emotional defenses take a direct hit. He'd been hauling freight across the outer colonies long enough to recognize desperation when he saw it, and this little girl was radiating the kind of fear that came from having nowhere else to turn. "Where are your parents, kid?" "Mama is sick. Very sick." The girl's lower lip trembled, but she fought back tears with the kind of determination that suggested she'd been the strong one in her family for longer than any child should have to be. "No one help us because we have no papers." "But you help us, yes. Please." Tom's practical side screamed at him to walk away. Undocumented refugees meant immigration complications, medical bills he couldn't afford, and the kind of bureaucratic entanglements that could interfere with his shipping schedule for months. He had cargo to deliver, routes to maintain, and a business that depended on avoiding exactly these kinds of situations. But the little girl was looking at him with the kind of absolute faith that suggested she'd already decided he was going to fix everything, and Tom found himself completely unprepared for the weight of that expectation. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "I am Zira of the Peaceful Valley." "Mama is Lyra of the Peaceful Valley. We come from Eridani 7 before the bad ships take our home." Tom knew about Eridani 7. The pacifist colony had been overrun 6 months ago by territorial expansion forces, scattering refugees across multiple systems. Most had been processed through official humanitarian channels, but some families had fallen through the cracks, ending up in situations like this. "Zira," he said carefully, "where is your mama now?" "I show you. Please, you come with me. She need medicine, but the station doctors say no help without proper documentation." Zira tugged on his arm with renewed urgency. "But you are cargo captain, yes? Cargo captains have influence with station authorities?" "Well, not exactly." Tom began, then stopped as he realized Zira was already leading him toward the station's lower levels with the confident stride of someone who'd mapped every corridor and maintenance passage during months of hiding from security sweeps. The journey through Crossroads Hub's forgotten areas was an education in how the station's most vulnerable residents survived. Zira navigated maintenance corridors and abandoned sections with practiced ease, her small form slipping through spaces that would challenge larger beings while she maintained a constant stream of chatter about her mother's condition, their living situation, and her absolute certainty that Tom was going to solve all their problems. "Mama taught biology before the war," Zira explained as they climbed through a service tunnel that hadn't seen official maintenance in years. "She very smart about growing things and making medicines from plants. But she gets sick after we leave home, and station medicines not work for Eridani biology." "What kind of sick?" Tom asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. She sleep too much and breathe funny, and sometimes she shake and cannot wake up. I try to take care of her, but I only little and I not know what to do. Zira's voice carried the kind of matter-of-fact despair that suggested she'd been living with this crisis for weeks. Other refugees try to help, but they have own problems and no money for medicines. They emerged into a section of the station that Tom had never seen before, a collection of abandoned storage bays that had been converted into makeshift living spaces by families who had nowhere else to go. The improvised shelters were built from salvaged materials and powered by jury-rigged connections to the station's secondary power grid, creating a hidden community that existed in the gaps between official notice. Zira led him to a small space that had been partitioned with hanging fabric, creating the illusion of privacy in what was essentially a converted storage closet. On a makeshift bed constructed from shipping containers and salvaged padding, a woman lay unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. "Mama," Zira whispered, moving to the bedside with the kind of practiced care that suggested she'd been serving as nurse, caretaker, and protector for longer than any child should have to manage. "I brought help. The nice human captain, just like you said would happen." Tom knelt beside the improvised bed, using his basic first aid training to assess Lyra's condition. Her pulse was rapid and weak, her skin had the grayish pallor that indicated severe nutritional deficiency, and her breathing suggested respiratory complications that were beyond anything he could treat with over-the-counter medications. "Zira," he said quietly, "how long has your mama been like this?" 3 days very bad, maybe 2 weeks getting worse." Zira settled beside her mother's bed with the kind of patient vigilance that suggested she'd been maintaining this watch continuously. "I try to give her water and little bit food, but she not wake up enough to eat properly." Tom studied the situation with the analytical approach he normally applied to cargo manifests and shipping schedules. Lyra needed immediate medical attention from professionals with xenobiology training, which meant station medical facilities. But station medical facilities required documentation, insurance verification, and legal status confirmation that refugees like Lyra and Zira couldn't provide. "Zira, do you have any kind of identification papers? Anything from your home colony or refugee processing? All papers lost when bad ships attack our home. Mama say we apply for new papers when we get to safe place, but everywhere we go, they say we need old papers to get new papers." Zira's expression held the kind of weary frustration that suggested she'd heard this circular logic many times before. "Captain Tom, you can help us get papers." The casual use of his name, combined with her absolute confidence in his problem-solving abilities, made Tom realize that he was already committed to helping whether he'd consciously decided to or not. Zira had somehow transformed him from a reluctant observer into someone responsible for her family's welfare, and the scary part was how natural the transition felt. "Zira, I'm going to help you and your mama, but it's going to be complicated and it might take some time." Tom stood up, his mind already working through the logistics of getting proper medical care for someone without official status. "Can you stay with her while I go talk to some people? You not leaving us?" Zira's voice carried the kind of panic that suggested she'd been abandoned by well-meaning helpers before. "I'm not leaving you," Tom said firmly, surprised by how much he meant it. "I'm going to figure out how to get your mama the help she needs. But I need you to be brave and take care of her until I get back, okay?" Zira nodded with the kind of solemn determination that made Tom's protective instincts flare with unexpected intensity. "I very good at taking care of mama. You go fix the problem, and I keep her safe until you come back." As Tom left the hidden refugee community and made his way back to the station's official levels, he reflected on how dramatically his simple shore leave had become complicated. 48 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether to order fish or chicken at the station restaurant. Now he was somehow responsible for a desperately ill woman and her daughter, neither of whom had any legal right to exist in regulated space. The smart thing would be to report their situation to station humanitarian services and let the professionals handle it through proper channels. The practical thing would be to provide them with enough money for basic supplies and continue with his original plans. But as he began researching medical facilities and immigration procedures, Tom realized that he'd already made his choice the moment Zira grabbed his sleeve and looked at him with absolute faith that he would help her family. He just hoped he could figure out how to live up to expectations he'd never agreed to meet. 3 hours into his research on Crossroads Hub's medical and immigration procedures, Tom had developed a profound appreciation for why desperate refugees sometimes chose illegal options over official channels. The bureaucratic requirements for treating undocumented aliens seemed designed by people who'd never encountered actual emergencies, while the costs involved would have strained his cargo hauler's budget even if he'd been planning for them. Medical treatment for non-citizens requires proof of ability to pay, valid identification from planet of origin, and current health certification from approved xenobiological specialists, the intake coordinator at Central Medical explained with the kind of patient politeness that suggested she delivered this information frequently. Without proper documentation, we can only provide emergency stabilization, which must be paid in advance. How much is emergency stabilization? For Eridani physiology, approximately 12,000 credits, excluding any specialized treatments that might be required after initial assessment. Tom felt his optimism deflate. 12,000 credits was more than he made for most cargo runs, and that was just for basic emergency care that wouldn't address whatever was causing Lyra's condition. What about humanitarian aid programs? Available for individuals with valid refugee status pending through official channels. Processing time is typically 8 to 12 weeks, assuming all documentation requirements are met. Tom thanked the coordinator and moved on to his next option, Station Immigration Services, where he hoped to find some way to expedite Lyra and Zira's official status. The waiting area was filled with beings from dozens of species, all clutching various forms of paperwork and wearing expressions of patient desperation that suggested the process was neither quick nor simple. Next, called the immigration officer, a bored-looking human who processed Tom's request for information with mechanical efficiency. I'm inquiring about expedited refugee status processing for a woman and child who need immediate medical attention. Refugee status applications require Form 447B, completed medical assessment from approved facilities, proof of persecution from planet of origin, and sponsor guarantee from established residents. The officer pulled up a holographic display showing the required documentation. Current processing time is 14 to 18 weeks. What about medical emergency provisions? Medical emergency provisions require existing legal status or approved sponsor guarantee with financial security deposit. The officer consulted his system. Security deposit for adult plus minor dependent is 25,000 credits, refundable upon completion of processing. Tom stared at the number on the display. 25,000 credits was more than he'd earned in the past 6 months combined. Are there any other options? Private humanitarian organizations sometimes provide emergency assistance, but they typically require referrals through official channels. Tom spent the next 2 hours visiting humanitarian organizations, each of which had its own set of requirements, waiting lists, and bureaucratic procedures that seemed designed to help everyone except the people who actually needed immediate assistance. By the time he returned to Zira's hidden shelter, he felt like he'd been fighting a war against paperwork and losing badly. Captain Tom. Zira's face lit up when she saw him returning through the service corridor. You fixed the problem. Mama can get medicine now. Tom looked at Lyra, whose condition appeared to have deteriorated during his absence, then at Zira, who was watching him with the kind of absolute faith that made his chest tight with responsibility and fear. It's complicated, sweetheart. The station has rules about treating people without proper papers, and getting those papers takes time we don't have. Zira's expression shifted from hope to the kind of patient disappointment that suggested she'd been let down by well-meaning adults before. So no help for Mama? I didn't say that, Tom replied quickly. I said the official way is complicated. But I've been hauling cargo for 15 years, and the first thing you learn is that there's always more than one way to solve a problem. He pulled out his personal communicator and scrolled through his contact list, looking for names from his years of working the outer colonies. Zira, do you know anything about your mama's medical history? What treatments she's had before, What medications work for her? Mama teach me about Eridani medicine before we leave home, Zira said eagerly, apparently recognizing that Tom was still trying to help rather than giving up. She say our people need different medicines because we evolved on different world with different plants and minerals. Can you tell me exactly what symptoms she's been having? Zira proceeded to give him a surprisingly detailed medical assessment that demonstrated both her intelligence and her intimate knowledge of her mother's condition. Tom realized that this 7-year-old had been serving as primary caregiver for weeks, monitoring symptoms and trying treatments with the kind of systematic approach that would impress trained medical professionals. Zira, he said with growing respect, you've been taking very good care of your mama. She teach me how when we first leave home. She say I need to be strong and smart because we only have each other now. Zira's voice carried the kind of matter-of-fact courage that made Tom understand why Lyra had been able to survive as long as she had. But I not know enough to make her better, only enough to keep her not getting worse. Tom activated his communicator and placed a call to Dr. Sarah Chen, a former military medic who now ran a small medical practice on the Outer Rim colonies. Sarah owed him several favors from cargo runs that had delivered critical medical supplies during emergency situations. Tom Bradley, Sarah's voice carried surprise and mild amusement. Don't tell me you finally managed to get yourself injured badly enough to need professional medical attention. Not me, Sarah. I've got a situation that requires someone with xenobiology experience and flexible interpretation of regulations. How flexible? Very flexible. I'm dealing with an Eridani woman and her daughter, refugees without documentation, and the woman needs medical treatment that station facilities won't provide without paperwork we can't get. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Tom, you know I can't practice medicine on Crossroads Hub without proper licensing and permissions. What if you were consulting via remote link with someone who could follow your instructions? That's creative. Who would be providing the hands-on care? Tom looked at Zira, who was following his conversation with the kind of intense attention that suggested she understood the implications. Her daughter. She's been caring for her mother for weeks, and she's surprisingly knowledgeable about Eridani physiology. How old is the daughter? 7, maybe 8. But she's been handling medical care responsibilities that most adults would struggle with. Sarah sighed, the sound carrying the weight of someone making a decision that would complicate her carefully ordered professional life. Tom, I can't officially treat patients through remote consultation, and I definitely can't recommend that a child provide medical care beyond basic first aid. Unofficially, if someone were to contact me for general information about Eridani medical conditions, and if that same someone happened to have a very mature young assistant who could follow detailed instructions, I might be able to provide educational information that could be helpful. Tom felt relief flood through him like a tide. Sarah, you're amazing. How quickly can we set up a consultation? Give me 20 minutes to review my references on Eridani physiology, and then we can have a very educational conversation about theoretical medical scenarios. After ending the call, Tom turned to find Zira watching him with a mixture of hope and wariness. Dr. Sarah is going to help us, he explained. But it means you're going to have to be very brave and very careful, because you'll be doing some of the actual treatment work while she guides you through the procedures. I can do that, Zira said with immediate determination. I already take care of Mama every day. Now I just have better teacher, yes. That's right. You'll have a very good teacher. Tom settled beside Lyra's makeshift bed, noting that her breathing seemed slightly more stable than when he'd left. Zira, while we're waiting for Dr. Sarah to call back, can you tell me more about how you and your mama ended up here? As Zira began telling him about their journey from Eridani 7, their failed attempts to obtain refugee status, and the community of displaced families that had formed in the station's forgotten areas, Tom realized that his simple shore leave had evolved into something far more complex than helping one sick woman and her daughter. He was becoming involved in a humanitarian crisis that touched dozens of families, all of whom were surviving in the gaps between official policy and actual need. And somehow, a determined 7-year-old with pointed ears and absolute faith in his problem-solving abilities had made him responsible for finding solutions that the station's official systems couldn't or wouldn't provide. The scary part was how natural that responsibility was beginning to feel. Dr. Sarah Chen's remote medical consultation turned into a 3-hour intensive course in emergency xenobiology, with Zira as Tom's impossibly young but surprisingly capable assistant. Working through Tom's communicator, Sarah guided them through diagnostic procedures that revealed Lyra was suffering from a combination of malnutrition, stress-induced immune system collapse, and exposure to atmospheric toxins that were slowly poisoning her Eridani physiology. The good news, Sarah explained through the communicator, is that none of these conditions are immediately fatal if properly treated. The bad news is that recovery will require several weeks of careful medical management and specialized nutrients that aren't available through normal station supplies. Tom watched Zira administer medications with the kind of precise care that would impress trained medical staff, following Sarah's instructions with complete focus while maintaining a steady stream of encouraging conversation with her unconscious mother. "Mama, the nice human doctors say you going to be okay," Zira whispered as she adjusted Lyra's foreline with practiced efficiency. "Captain Tom, bring help, just like you always say would happen when we find the right person." "Zira's doing excellent work," Sarah observed through the communicator. "Tom, that little girl has natural medical instincts that would serve her well in professional training. Her mother taught her very well." "She's remarkable," Tom agreed, though his admiration was tempered by growing concern about their long-term situation. Even with Sarah's guidance, they were providing emergency care in an abandoned storage bay using smuggled medical supplies, while station security grew increasingly suspicious of his frequent trips to the lower levels. The crisis escalated when Tom's communicator chirped with an incoming priority message from Station Security Commander Rodriguez. "Captain Bradley, you're requested to report to Security Office 7 for routine questioning regarding your recent activities on Crossroads Hub. Please respond within 2 hours to confirm your appointment time." Tom felt ice settle in his stomach. Routine questioning meant they'd been monitoring his movements and had identified him as connected to unauthorized activities in the station's restricted areas. "Zira," he said carefully, not wanting to frighten her but needing to prepare for complications, "I need to go talk to station security for a little while. Dr. Sarah will stay on the communicator to help you take care of your mama." Zira's eyes went wide with the kind of fear that suggested she understood exactly what station security interest meant for undocumented refugees. "They take us away." "Not if I can help it." Tom handed her the communicator, noting how small her hands looked as she accepted responsibility for her mother's continued care. "Zira, you keep following Dr. Sarah's instructions, and you don't let anyone accept me into this shelter, okay?" "Captain Tom," Zira's voice carried the kind of desperate urgency that made his protective instincts flare with unexpected intensity, "you come back, yes? You not leave us like other people who say they help." "I'm coming back," Tom said firmly, surprised by how much he meant it. "Zira, I promise you I'm not going anywhere until your mama is better and you're both safe." The security office interview confirmed Tom's worst fears. Commander Rodriguez had been monitoring his activities as part of a broader investigation into unauthorized refugee settlements in the station's lower levels. "Captain Bradley, our records show 17 visits to restricted sections over the past 4 days, multiple purchases of medical supplies without corresponding injury reports, and extended communications with off-station medical personnel." Rodriguez consulted his data pad with professional efficiency. "Can you explain these activities?" Tom had spent the walk to the security office preparing for this conversation, but facing actual interrogation made him realize how little protection his cargo hauler credentials provided against determined investigation. "Commander, I've been helping a sick woman and her daughter who need medical attention. Unauthorized aliens receiving medical care without proper documentation represents a serious violation of station regulations." Rodriguez leaned forward with the kind of focused attention that suggested Tom's answer would determine whether this remained a friendly interview or became a formal investigation. "Are you aware that harboring undocumented refugees is a federal crime with penalties including loss of shipping licenses and criminal prosecution?" I'm aware that letting a sick woman die because she doesn't have paperwork is something I can't live with, Tom replied, his patience with bureaucracy finally reaching its breaking point. Captain Bradley, I understand your humanitarian impulses, but station policy exists to maintain order and security for all residents. We cannot make exceptions based on individual circumstances. What happens to the woman and her daughter if I stop helping them? Rodriguez consulted his files. Standard procedure is deportation to designated processing facilities where their refugee claims can be evaluated through proper channels. What are conditions like in those processing facilities? That's not within my jurisdiction, Captain. My responsibility is maintaining station security and regulatory compliance. Tom realized that Commander Rodriguez wasn't being deliberately cruel, he was simply implementing policies designed by people who'd never had to look a frightened 7-year-old in the eyes and explain why regulations mattered more than her mother's life. Commander, what would it take to give them temporary legal status while their refugee claims are processed? Sponsor guarantee from a station resident with sufficient financial resources to ensure compliance with immigration requirements. Rodriguez pulled up the relevant regulations. Security deposit of 25,000 credits, plus ongoing responsibility for their accommodation, medical care, and legal representation. Tom stared at the numbers on Rodriguez's screen, calculating rapidly. 25,000 credits would wipe out his savings and require him to mortgage his cargo hauler, but it would provide Lyra and Zira with legal protection while they recovered and established themselves. If I provide sponsor guarantee, can they remain on the station during processing? With proper sponsor guarantee, yes. But Captain Bradley, you should understand that this makes you legally responsible for their actions and financially liable for any costs they incur. Are you prepared for that level of commitment to people you've known for less than a week? Tom thought about Zira's absolute faith in his ability to solve problems, about Lyra's quiet dignity despite her desperate circumstances, about the hidden community of refugees who were surviving on hope and charity in forgotten corners of the station. Commander, how quickly can we process the sponsor guarantee paperwork? With expedited processing, approximately 6 hours. Rodriguez studied Tom's face with professional assessment. Captain, are you certain about this decision? Once you sign sponsor guarantee documents, you're legally committed until their refugee status is resolved, which could take months or years. Tom activated his personal communicator and placed a call to his financial management service, authorizing the transfer that would transform his comfortable financial cushion into a legal commitment he'd never expected to make. Commander, I'm certain. Let's get started on the paperwork. 6 hours later, Tom returned to Zira's shelter carrying official temporary residence permits and a small bag of specialized Eridani medical supplies that station medical facilities had finally agreed to provide for a sponsored refugee family. Captain Tom. Zira launched herself at him with the kind of enthusiastic hug that nearly knocked him over. Mama, wake up. She drink water and eat little bit food and ask about nice human who helping us. Tom looked at Lyra, who was sitting up for the first time since he'd met them, her color improved and her eyes clear with intelligence and gratitude that made his financial sacrifice seem like the best investment he'd ever made. Captain Bradley, Lyra said in accented but clear standard, Zira tells me you have been caring for us like family. I do not know how to thank you for such kindness to strangers. You don't need to thank me, Tom replied, settling beside their improvised bed and noting how much more like a home their shelter felt now that it contained hope instead of just desperation. Though I should probably mention that you're both officially my responsibility now, at least until your refugee status gets processed. What does that mean? Zira asked with the kind of curious attention that suggested she was already planning how to be the best possible responsibility. It means we're going to figure out this family thing together, Tom said, surprised by how natural the word family felt when applied to his new circumstances. And it means you're going to help me learn how to take care of people instead of just cargo. As Zira settled between Tom and her mother, chattering excitedly about all the things she wanted to show him and teach him about Eridani culture, Tom realized that his carefully planned, solitary cargo hauler's life had been permanently altered by a small alien child with pointed ears and absolute faith in the power of human kindness. The scary part was how much he was looking forward to discovering what came next. 3 months later, Tom found himself piloting his cargo hauler toward Harmony Station with the strangest and most satisfying crew he'd ever worked with. Lyra had recovered sufficiently to serve as his navigator and botanical specialist, while Zira had appointed herself chief communications officer and morale supervisor, roles she took with the kind of serious enthusiasm that made routine shipping runs feel like grand adventures. "Captain Tom," Zira announced from the co-pilot seat, "I have calculated that this cargo of agricultural equipment will help Harmony Station improve food production by approximately 30%, which means our delivery is very important for colony success." "That's excellent analysis, Chief Zira," Tom replied, noting how naturally he'd adapted to having family conversations during flight operations. "What does Navigator Lyra think about our approach trajectory?" "Navigator Lyra thinks our pilot has learned to coordinate with his crew very effectively," Lyra observed from the navigation station, her voice carrying warmth and amusement. "Though she suggests reducing approach speed by 10% to accommodate the agricultural equipment's handling specifications." Tom made the adjustment with the kind of automatic cooperation that had developed over months of working together as a family unit. What had begun as an impulsive humanitarian gesture had evolved into the most efficient and satisfying cargo operation he'd ever run, with Lyra's scientific knowledge and Zira's remarkable organizational abilities transforming his simple freight business into something approaching professional sophistication. Harmony Station appeared on their view screen as a modest collection of interconnected modules orbiting a planet that showed promising signs of agricultural development. The colony had been established by a consortium of species committed to sustainable development and interspecies cooperation, making it exactly the kind of place where a human cargo captain and his Eridani family could build a legitimate life together. "Harmony Station Control, this is cargo hauler Phoenix requesting docking clearance for scheduled agricultural equipment delivery." "Phoenix, you are cleared for docking Bay 7. Welcome back, Captain Bradley. Station Administrator Chen is looking forward to discussing your permanent relocation proposal." Tom had been negotiating with Harmony Station's leadership for 2 months, proposing to establish his cargo operation as a permanent station service while Lyra contributed her botanical expertise to their agricultural development programs. The arrangement would provide them with stable income, official residency status, and a community that valued their combined skills rather than seeing them as regulatory complications. "Zira," Tom said as they approached the docking bay, "are you ready for the big presentation?" "I have been ready for weeks," Zira replied with the kind of confident determination that had become her trademark. "I will show Administrator Chen our family efficiency reports, cargo delivery statistics, and botanical improvement proposals. She will see that hiring us is best decision for station development." Tom had learned that Zira's presentation skills, combined with her natural charm and obvious intelligence, made her remarkably effective at convincing adults to consider proposals they might otherwise dismiss. Her complete confidence in their family's capabilities had a way of making other people confident as well. The meeting with Administrator Chen exceeded even Tom's optimistic expectations. Harmony Station needed reliable cargo services for their growing agricultural trade, while Lyra's expertise in sustainable botanical development addressed critical needs in their colony expansion plans. More importantly, their integrated family operation demonstrated the kind of interspecies cooperation that the station was trying to promote as a model for frontier development. "Captain Bradley," Administrator Chen concluded after reviewing their proposal, "Harmony Station would be honored to have your family as permanent residents and primary cargo service providers. Dr. Lyra's agricultural research proposals alone justify the arrangement, and Zira's organizational contributions are remarkably sophisticated for someone her age." "Administrator Chen," Zira said with formal politeness, "does this mean we can stay here forever and Captain Tom does not have to worry about bureaucratic complications anymore?" "This means you're officially home," Administrator Chen replied with a smile. "Welcome to Harmony Station, Bradley family." 6 months after that, Tom stood in the observation lounge of their permanent quarters on Harmony Station, watching Lyra work in the agricultural research facility she now directed while Zira attended the station's integrated education program with students from half a dozen species. His cargo hauler Phoenix sat in the station's commercial docking bay, fully booked with agricultural trade runs that provided steady income while allowing them to maintain their family schedule. "Captain Tom," Zira said, joining him at the observation window after completing her daily lessons, "do you remember when I first grabbed your sleeve in the marketplace and asked for help? I remember thinking you were going to complicate my simple, organized life in ways I didn't want to deal with," Tom replied honestly. "And now?" Tom looked at their quarters, decorated with Eridani art and human photographs, filled with the comfortable chaos of family life that had replaced his sterile, solitary cargo hauler's existence. "Now I think you gave me the best complication I could have asked for." He put his arm around Zira's shoulders, still amazed by how natural the protective gesture had become. "Though I have to say, for someone who claimed to need my help, you've ended up teaching me most of what I know about being part of a family." "Mama always say that helping each other is how families work," Zira observed with the kind of practical wisdom that continued to surprise him. "You help us when we need medical care and safe place to live. We help you when you need family and better cargo business. Everyone gets what they need. Is that how you planned it?" Zira grinned with the kind of mischievous expression that suggested she'd always been more strategic than he'd realized. "Maybe little bit planned. When I see you in marketplace, you look like person who need family as much as we need help. So I think maybe we can solve both problems together." Tom stared at her. "You mean you specifically chose me?" "I choose person with kind eyes and good heart who look lonely enough to appreciate having family," Zira confirmed. "Mama teach me to recognize people who want to help but not know how. You perfect candidate for family adoption project." "Family adoption project?" "Eridani children sometimes adopt adults who need family guidance," Lyra explained, approaching from the agricultural facility with the kind of amused expression that suggested she'd been listening to their conversation. "Zira identified you as excellent candidate for rehabilitation from solitary cargo hauler to proper family member." Tom felt laughter building in his chest as he realized that his entire transformation from independent operator to devoted family man had been orchestrated by a 7-year-old alien girl with pointed ears and a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. "So I wasn't rescuing you," he said slowly. "You were rescuing me." "We rescue each other," Zira corrected. "That what real families do. Everyone take care of everyone, and everyone get taken care of." As Tom looked around their home, filled with the comfortable noise of family life, decorated with evidence of their shared experiences, alive with the kind of love that had nothing to do with species or biology, he realized that Zira was absolutely right. Some of the best rescues happened when people chose to take care of each other, regardless of the complications that might arise. And sometimes the most important journeys weren't about traveling between stars, but about discovering that family could be found in the most unexpected places, through the simple act of responding when someone small and desperate grabbed your sleeve and asked for help. "Zira," he said finally, "remind me to teach you how to pilot the Phoenix. If you're this good at family planning, I want to see what you can do with an actual starship." "Already learning," Zira replied with satisfaction. "Mama teaching me navigation, you teaching me cargo operations, and I teaching myself advanced flight dynamics through station computer systems. Next year I will be qualified junior pilot." Tom realized that his carefully planned, predictable cargo hauler's life had been permanently transformed into something far more complex, far more challenging, and infinitely more rewarding than anything he'd imagined possible. And it had all begun with a small hand grabbing his sleeve and a desperate voice saying, "Please, human, my mom needs us." The best part was discovering that he'd needed them just as much, even if he hadn't known it at the time.